I turned in the script and was just like in a daze. It was really just, and I went in the other room and told my wife, I was like, this series is going to be a classic. That was the moment where I
Wow.
was like, yeah, this is truly something special.
はじめまして日本
I think one of the really interesting things about manga translation to me is that it's one of those fields where you have to really work hard at it and you have to be very passionate about it. In my research for this, I did not find any manga translators who got into it for the money or because it was easy. So, it all comes from a place of passion. I know for you, at least I'm given to understand that a lot of that came from, a childhood interest in Japanese culture and in anime. And I'm just wondering, could you maybe take me back a little bit to your early memories of anime and like what shows you were particularly entranced by?
Yeah, totally. Well, a big one for I think a lot of folks from my generation was Dragon Ball. Both the original and then Dragon Ball Z. That was really huge. Gundam Wing was a big one. Um, Shaman King was a really cool one I was into. Really, everything that was kind of on Toonami in like the late '90s, early 2000s. That was, it was all great. Outlaw Star, all that stuff. Um, and kind of along those lines, like the Final Fantasy VII, Legend of Zelda, all that period, was just really kind of a golden age. I feel like, yeah.
I think that era of anime is so interesting to me, and I'm by no means an expert on it, but people talked about how difficult it was to find these things. I think Toonami was a huge deal for a lot of people. So, did you get a chance at that age to dive into some of the underground stuff? Like, were you getting VHS tapes of like fan translations and things, or was it kind of just what was on Toonami?
Yeah, it was kind of whatever was available, So Toonami was definitely the starting point, and then you could find a few things at Blockbuster, like more obscure stuff. And then I think there were some other channels. I think like Fox Kids had Escaflowne, like this mech show. So there were a few other kind of places to access that stuff, but it was still pretty limited. It was just kind of what was available. I had no idea about how to get like bootleg stuff or access kind of the underground. So it was whatever was kind of widely available was on my radar.
Well, and then I heard you mention that you got into manga a little bit in middle school. How did that come about? Was that like from the library? Was that from friends, family? How did that happen?
So when when I was in school, my brother, I think he picked up a copy of the Shonen Jump magazine. I don't know if you remember when that was around, but it was like these big, thick um, manga magazines that kind of mimic the ones in Japan that they have. So it was like you pick up one issue, you'd have Dragon Ball, One Piece, Death Note, everything that was kind of going on at the time. Um, and that was like really just open up that world for us. So he got a subscription of that. We were getting that for years, and then I think around that time, realized you could just go to the store and get Tonkabone volumes. So I got really into Hellsing, the like vampire one, a couple others from around that time, um, and then it kind of petered off for me for a little bit into high school, but it definitely came back in full force, a little later on. Yeah,
Well, if my research is correct, I think you've been a full-time translator for around 7 years now. Is that about right?
yeah, that's right.
But before that, I know you taught English in Japan, but did you mess around with fan translations at all? Did you ever make those? Like because I think for a lot of people, they can get into it just by being a huge fan and just doing it for fun. I'm curious, what was your journey into it?
Yeah, there was definitely some of that going on. I never, uh, had them up on websites or anything. It was more of just sort of a personal passion project. So, like when I was living in Japan, I was working on, there's this old series called Lucky Man from Shonen Jump back in like the 80s. This like really, crudely drawn, absurd kind of gag manga. There's this theory out there that it was actually written by the guy who wrote Death Note under like a pen name. Just, the total night and day different. But there are some compelling arguments for that being the case. But anyway, I did, I think, a couple chapters of that.
And so that was just for fun? Like what was the inclination there? It's so interesting to me. Like you just did it just totally on your own?
Yeah, just to see if I could really, and I think my rationale at that time was like, okay, if I want to be able to develop a portfolio to send to publishers, if I want to try to make this happen, I really want to focus on stuff that doesn't have like a published English version, just so there'd be no doubt that I like copied it from somebody, So I was trying to find kind of obscure stuff that I enjoyed that there was no counterpart to. So, they would know it came from me. So I did a bit of that. And then did a couple kind of one-shots by Asano Inio, some of his stuff that hadn't come over here.
And so when you had these, did you like share them with friends at all? I know you just did it just because you loved it, but like did it get around to, your circle of friends or anything?
No. So I mean the Lucky Man stuff, it didn't really make it past the script stage. It was just like lines in a notebook. I didn't take the time to like Photoshop the text into the bubbles. I did do that for the Inio Asano piece and ended up sending that to an agency later on, which helped me get this job. But for whatever reason, I think it still felt pretty tender at that stage. And so like the thought of soliciting feedback from friends was a little overwhelming,
Absolutely. So, yeah, no, I know exactly what that feeling is like. Well, I think with a lot of creative people, especially in, I think when you got into anime and all these things, it was such a blossoming industry. It was so new. I think a lot of creative people, especially in an area like that where it's so new, there's not a path carved out yet. I think a lot of them can second guess themselves or can end up bouncing around between different jobs and before deciding that's what they want to do. And I have my own personal experiences with that, and we'll get to Blue Lock later, I imagine, but I think a lot of why I do creative things now I frankly just owe to Blue Lock. Like I could ramble on about that all day, but I'm curious for you, was there a moment or a string of things that made you say, hey, I really gotta at least make an effort to make this to really put my all into this?
Yeah, for sure. Early on, maybe, gosh, this was like 2013, I guess. I made some kind of, initial efforts to reach out to publishers, and it just didn't go anywhere, and kind of got busy with other things. So then, a few years later, I was, making art on my own in a way that felt really rewarding, but what I was doing for work, I was, kind of stuck in these customer service jobs and like not a whole lot of prospects beyond that, and was just feeling really stuck and depressed. And, I kind of sat myself down and was like, okay, I have these Japanese skills that I'm doing nothing with. I think I gotta try and make something of this, So started hitting the books again, and it happened fast. It was like a month later, I found this listing on Craigslist for an agency and got my first client there, and kind of the rest is history. But really took kind of hitting a point where I was really dissatisfied with things to get kind of galvanized to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I know exactly what it's like. I mean, I won't ramble on about this too long, but like, I think, until let's see, what's today? Yeah, like 13 months ago or so, I quit. I was working as an urban planner, and then I honestly, like, it really was like Blue Lock was the reason why I quit that job. Like, because especially it's one of the I have two Blue Lock tattoos, and Borrow is one of them from the Borrow must no what you know what I'm talking about, the moment where he's gonna pass and then decides not to. Anyways,
Yeah.
that was a moment to me where it was like, ah, fuck. I was like, man, that's hitting way harder than it needs to. I think I gotta listen to this. So I relate to that. I relate to that so much. But I
Yeah.
think I find I'm so interested in some of the quotidian kind of elements of artistic creation because of course, as a fan, I just read the thing and then I'm like, sick, cool. I'll be back next week and I'll read it again. But obviously you and Yusuke Nomura and Miyuki Kaneshiro, like, and I mean, and others, of course, are the people who have to like make it and actually put in the labor to make it happen, which is so interesting to me. But so I'd love to break that down a little bit. So I'm sure it's different for different books, but I would love to learn a little bit more about the process of that. So, for example, like when you get uh a project or the script for the week or whatever, do you just get the script? Does it have completed art? Is it draft art? And then like how long do you have for turnaround? Yeah, I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, so it definitely depends on the project. Typically, it's all completed art like you could buy over in Japan, um, and yeah, again, it depends on the project as far as turnaround time. When I first started on Blue Lock, we were going volume by volume, um, and there was kind of a maybe 4 or 5 month ramp up where we were just doing a bunch of it to kind of get ready for the series launch. These days, we're doing it chapter by chapter, so um, there's usually like a 2 to 3 day window between getting the pages and then turning in the final chapter with the words in it. So yeah, a lot more fast paced these days. There's a bit more pressure to it. I kind of, in my mind, think of it like a live show, almost like Saturday Night Live.
Mm.
Where it's like you've got this timeline and you got to make it happen. You got to just do the best you can and put it out and then move on to next week. Um,
Yeah,
but it's
I mean, I love that so much. And like well, I don't want to ramble on about myself too much, but I find that so
okay.
relatable because
I mean, yeah, me
it's
too.
the that's one of those things about like interviews is that how do I describe this? It's one of those things of, you have like an hour with this person, hour, however long it is. Obviously, it varies, and it's like you just got to get in and do it, and yeah, that's a great metaphor. It feels so much like I think honestly, again, it's the Blue Lock thing. I think about it like I'm playing a match or whatever. That's kind of the framing I use, but in any event, so when you get what do you call it? Like I guess the chapter. Yeah, chapter. That sounds right. When you get the chapter, I'm curious
Mhm.
what the translation process is like. Like, so do you translate it as you're reading through it the first time? Do you go through and then go through a second time and do it? How do you kind of attack it?
Yeah, so typically I will do kind of a um, quick pass through, not skimming it, but like just reading through to get a sense of what's going on, and then writing down whatever lines come really quickly that I don't have to think too much about, just to get through, get a rough draft, um, and then yeah, I'll go back through a few more times, um, and pretty often, the sort of like big impact moments, the big impact lines, the ones where it's like, maybe a full page panel with like one line on it or 2 lines, those like big punchy moments, those are the hardest to do, to really capture um, whatever they're going for there, and I'll chew on that for as long as I possibly can. I think my letterer, well, my letterer is great, and he really gives me that time. He's quick to turn around his side of it, because some of those I'll really just chew on right up to the last possible second, to make sure it's hitting right, you know.
You know, I think when you're working on something that is so emotive, that requires so much personal insight, perspective, and everything. Because I mean, I find this to be true with interviews. Like I have to follow a specific process, and I have to like really make sure that I'm not thinking about, I don't know what I need to. I'm just realizing I'm gonna move my camera so my fridge is not in frame. Uh, anyways, I need to make sure I've like eaten everything beforehand, that I'm like that I slept okay, that I'm not worrying about like it's whatever it is. So I'm just curious for you, how do you kind of create that space for yourself to be able to you know put yourself in, I don't know if it's the character's shoes, the writer's shoes, the audience's shoes, but yeah, how do you create that space for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of an ongoing thing to figure out. Um, Recently, I've had a lot of good success with using the Pomodoro method. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Tell me about it.
Basically, you kind of like set a timer and do like really focused, intense work for however long, 30, 40 minutes. I find like 40, 45 works well for me. And then when that's up, kind of wherever you're at, you just get up and walk away and go look at something else, you know. Um, if I don't do that, I end up just piddling around online, and it's like, it just drains your energy, um, but yeah, trying to set those kind of um, closed boundaries on my time and attention really helps. I find, with Blue Lock, with some of the, if they're like playing a game and it's the real like high energy scenes, listening to something with like a kind of intense beat will really help get in the mood, kind of capture some of that energy. Um, but
So do you use music for like for kind of all different scene? I mean, not even just, we can even expand beyond Blue Lock. You can, whichever project jumps to you. But do you use would you be listening to like calmer music for slice of life or like romance scenes or books, or do you only need it for that kind of high intensity stuff?
yeah, I mean, there are definitely times when I'd rather just have nothing playing and just it's easier to focus with silence. But yeah, if I'm working on like a rom-com, some like kind of light jazzy pop kind of stuff works really well, and gets some of that lightness, that buoyancy. Or if I'm doing something with an intense battle scene, more like metal or something, intense rock really kind of gets me in that headspace. So it's not something I do all the time, but when I do, it's usually like if I'm sitting here and really like having a hard time focusing or kind of getting into the headspace, that the music can help for sure.
No, I mean, everything you say is just like, oh yeah, no, like totally. I do the exact same. Like it's different for different interviews, and like I try different approaches at different times. But like a lot of times before an interview, I'll listen to, um, I don't know if you're a sport. I can't remember the name of the song. I don't know if you're a sports fan at all, but that like that thing. Like I'll listen to that before sometimes, and then like today I was like, no, that's crazy. I'm not doing that. So I listened to like, I don't know, just low key like folk stuff. But no, I love that. I find that so relatable. I think, oh God, there's so many things I want to touch on. One of the aspects of there, I mean, there's so many unique things about manga as an art form, but one of the things I love is that as compared to almost anything else, to me, it's really the only art form that can run for 20, 30, 40 years from the same person's perspective. Like, sure, okay, Spider-Man's been running for 80 years, but it's like 400 different writers. It's not one story.
Yeah.
But I mean, with some of these longer running series, you can really tell an in-depth story and change the tone, all these different things over time. So I'm curious for you, as the translator, do you have to do you almost have to like monitor the tone, or like where the series is going, so you can make sure the language kind of reflects that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, and I think it's I think it's tough to see those sorts of shifts like as they're happening.
Hmm.
Like every now and then I'll go back and look at an early volume from Blue Lock, and I'm just kind of shocked at how different the art looks. And uh, how much more abrasive the tone is. Like,
Hmm.
um, I feel like those kind of early volumes, they were going for this kind of shock factor
Hmm.
of just like, wow, this guy he's this sadistic creep, who's like locking these kids in this building. Um, and they're all, it's this like Lord of the Flies thing. And then as it goes on, you start peeling back the layers a bit more. And it's like, no, it's not really about that. Like they're learning, really how to be themselves and how to work with each other as themselves, and not this sort of forced version of who they thought they were supposed to be. Um, and so, it's gotten to this really interesting place that I wouldn't have seen at the beginning. But it's really hard to point to points along the way where it's like, oh, this is where there was like a real clear, sharp turn, like I can certainly think of certain moments um,
I
that
could
really stuck
I
out
could
to
maybe
me.
throw out a few if you'd like. Like I think, for example, I think there's always been quite a lot of homoeroticism to Blue Lock, and one of the interesting elements of it to me is that I don't know if it's maybe just the uh, Manuki Kaneshiro feeling more comfortable talking about it over time. I'm not sure, but it seems like it's gotten a lot more explicit as it goes on.
Mm.
Um, has that been like a change in terms of just being like, oh, okay, this doesn't have to be subtext; it can just be like text now. Um, I don't know. Is there something to that one, do you think?
I mean, I definitely think there's something to that. And it's the sort of thing where, there's just enough kind of ambiguity that it's like, if he wanted to deny it was there, I think he could, but it's also like, um, I mean, it was just so apparent from pretty early on that there was this kind of undertone, especially with certain characters. And so, it felt like it would be dishonest to not bring that forward, that it's part of the story, it's part of these characters. So it's like, I'm going to match it as it appears there, so somebody like Shido, who's just like over the top, um, he's going to be kind of more putting it out there. And then with like, say, Nagi and Reo, it's like, are they friends? Are they more? That's kind of for them to decide. But the sorts of ways that they think about and refer to each other, I try to keep those as close to the Japanese as possible. Yeah.
And I think another how do I phrase this? Of course, language is a living thing, and over time, the English language changes. I imagine I don't know Japanese. I imagine the Japanese language changes. There's new slang and everything. Do you
Mm-hmm.
find yourself having to, maybe having to is a bad way to phrase it, but do you need to kind of stay up to date in terms of like monitoring the ways that the language changes, or like do you find yourself, I don't know. I'm struggling to phrase that question, but does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I'd say yes, and it's tough to do, especially not living there, and not being immersed in the culture all day, every day. Um, I'd say it's pretty rare that I'll encounter like a piece of slang that I don't recognize. And if I do, it's pretty easy to find out like, okay, this is what this means, and this is kind of a rough equivalent. Um, but
Or maybe even like a similar, idea. But I mean, Blue Lock is not a political or historical book so much, but do you maybe for some of the other series or things like that, do you find yourself needing to stay up to date with like Japanese politics or history or just different aspects of it in that regard, so you can kind of know where the authors are pulling from?
Yeah, I mean, I try to have a general sense of what's going on. I don't have a lot. I mean, I don't really have any series that are really pulling in like up to date kind of current events.
Sure.
And then as far as history goes, I have a kind of a rough enough grasp to deal with it when it comes up. I haven't done a ton of like real historical stuff, but when I do, I'll research what I can and learn about the context and all that. But yeah, I'd say, for better or worse, most of my stuff is pretty squarely in this sort of like, contemporary setting that's also disconnected from the actual situation in a lot of ways. Like, I don't think I've really encountered any series that talk about like COVID or anything, even though that was such a huge, and it continues to be a huge thing in this world. It's like manga is kind of separate from that in its own world, which is
No,
interesting.
I'm following you. And I think, I mean, I guess getting back to some of the unique elements about manga, one of them to me is it's such a structural form of writing, at least to me. I'm not an expert on manga, the things I think of, because I mean, Blue Lock or some of these other series are, they're released each week, and you kind of have to like, there has to be a there, like you kind of need to make it so people can tune in every week and something's happening. And I think one of the things I find so interesting is that a lot of concepts, will come up and then will be brought up for maybe the entire series, maybe an arc or whatever. And I guess I'm just thinking like maybe you don't even, I doubt they tell you like, hey, this idea of a genius or a talented learner or a monster is going to come up 300 times. Uh, so I guess I'm just wondering, do you find yourself like trying to guess which concepts will come up over and over again so that you make sure it's like a word that you use, like words that can happen over and over without it being like annoying?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I certainly don't get told ahead of time, like this is going to be an ongoing thing, so make sure you really nail it. You can kind of like, you start to get a sense for it, um, whether it's just like kind of the emphasis being given to things or the general trajectory of the story. They're like, oh, okay, this is important. Really got to make this a good buzzword. So yeah, it's all just kind of vibe, and I feel like there are some things that kind of crop up and just fall away, but yeah, a lot of those things really keep coming. So I hope I got it right.
Nah, you're crushing it. You're crushing it. You know,
Okay.
I think one of the things I've touched on is how unique manga is. But one of the things I'm really curious about is manga translation a transferable skill in terms of would you feel comfortable translating poetry, literature, doing subtitles for films, or is that just a totally different discipline?
I mean, there's definitely a fair amount of overlap. I've yeah, dabbled in prose a bit, and it's quite a different skill set. I mean, manga, it's the words working with the pictures, right? And so whatever you write is going to be, in that very specific context with those reference points, and it's also really dialogue heavy. So um, something like prose, where a lot of it is just sort of narration and not necessarily people talking to each other, to me feels like a pretty different skill set. um, I'd say subtitles would be a lot more similar, just because I mean it's pretty much all dialogue, in reference to images. But yeah, I've done a few things, few non-manga things, but mostly this is kind of my wheelhouse. So would certainly be interested in branching out more, but this is just kind of what's come up the most.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Oh gosh, what am I looking for? One of the things I've noticed about, manga translation is that I think as more Americans are exposed to anime or Japanese culture, or really just global culture in general, just because of the nature of the internet and the changing world and everything, it seems like there are certain aspects of Japanese language that we can kind of be expected to understand. Like, they can say Isagi-kun, and maybe we won't need to explain what like kun means. And I guess I'm just curious, do you think it's possible that people, this is such an esoteric question, but I don't know. Do you think it's possible that people will start to gain more of an understanding of the Japanese language over time, and that you'll be able to use more of the natural Japanese, whether that be in suffixes? That's probably totally not the right term, but I imagine you take my meaning. Uh, I don't know. Do you think that's something that could happen?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it already has been happening. I think it's been a pretty slow development, um, but it definitely is. I think there was a time when you know no English publisher would put san or kun or any of those things in their manga because people would get pissed off and confused, and um, but these days, like I'd say probably even a casual fan of manga and anime, has some knowledge of like the difference between san and kun and chan and like those different things, which just wasn't there 20 years ago. So, um, yeah, I think it definitely is moving in that direction. I think it really depends on the publisher, just kind of how comfortable they are, like pushing that forward or playing it safe. Certain clients I have, they want you to keep all the honorifics that are there. Other ones, they want you to change it to Mr. Mrs. And that's just kind of their style guide. So I suspect it will keep moving in that direction where people who are interested in this stuff are sort of absorbing these cultural things like through osmosis, and that publishers will see that there's this kind of greater um, awareness of these concepts and that they can kind of meet the readers at like a higher level, which I think is really cool.
I love it, and I don't know. I think it's so cool because yeah, it's just great to see because I think it makes the reading, it makes it flow so much more naturally than, if you had to kind of shoehorn in kind of a brutish English translation of some of these things, of some of these sort of very foundational concepts of the Japanese language. Not that I know much about the Japanese language, but you take my point. Um, if I could, I would love to just bounce. I have a few lines I've written down, or just some of my favorite Blue Lock lines, and some of these are from ages ago, so maybe you won't remember them or something won't jump to mind. But I would love to
Okay.
just read you a couple of these and get, I don't know, your memory of it, if there were different translations you thought of, whatever jumps to you. So from the U20 arc, Rinatoshi's monologue. All of you with your convenient value systems, I won't let you intrude in my life. One of my favorite like just moments in like human fiction ever. Uh, so I guess I don't even totally know what my question is, but I would just love if you could share maybe how it was translated, what you remember about that. Yeah, if there were different ways you thought about approaching it, I would love to hear anything you have to share on that.
Oh man, this is like
I can do a more
uh,
recent one if you'd like.
let's go through the list. How about I'll call out if there's one that like really jumps out. Um, there's so much. Like I remember the
Yeah.
scene. I can vaguely remember him saying it.
No, this is
But
years ago for you. No, no
yeah,
worries at all. No worries at all. Um, okay, we'll go chronologically, and it totally okay if these don't jump out at you. Kunigami, I'm not a hero anymore. I left that immature joke back in hell. It's just, I just love that line. It's so edgy. It just feels like something the Punisher would say. And I'm like, that's so sick. But
yeah,
okay, and then I have four written down. I'll just run through them and
cool.
from Isagi, I believe he was talking about how he was analyzing Kaiser's metavision, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Um, this big bang piece will set me on the path to being the world's best. I just I love that line so much. It's so weird and so like esoteric and psychologically and philosophically complex that I was like, it the notion of translating that makes me like sick with anxiety. It seems like so hard. Um, and then last one for you. This is from this one of the more recent chapters of Ego and Isagi on the roof of Blue Lock.
Uh,
One of my favorite chapters. I love it so much. Uh, Ego is talking. I am getting off on the thing. Okay. At the extremity of thought and effort, mind and body become one. And I just love that whole thing where they're talking about, the god of soccer and all
yeah.
these different things. So those are the ones I picked out. I would just love anything at all that jumps out to you about any of them. I mean, yeah, I could ramble on about it for an hour, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought in the God of Soccer chapter. That one, I turned in the script and was just like in a daze. It was really just, and I went in the other room and told my wife, I was like, this series is going to be a classic. That was the moment where I
Oh.
was like, yeah, this is truly something special. So
So
and
can
yeah,
you unpack that for me? That's so interesting. I would love to hear more about that.
I mean, I think that was the point where it really became clear what was going on, um, from a sort of the philosophical underpinnings of what this whole thing was about. Like, gosh, I don't remember when it was. I feel like it was pretty early on that they brought in like the flow state,
Hmm.
uh, and that was. I think that was probably the first point where I was like, oh, like this is not just some edgy Lord of the Flies kind of like shock thing. Um, this is something much more interesting. Um, and then, every time Ego would have one of his, lectures about ego and society and all these things, I really look forward to those. I think those are some of the most fun to work on, and that I really agonize over the most to make sure I'm really being precise about what he's trying to say and what it says about the series. And so, there are the soccer god thing and the sort of like near mystical quality of this experience he's describing. Um, yeah, I tried to draw on some. I've been practicing Zen for a long time, and the literature around that, there's a similar history of trying to describe the indescribable, and so tried to really make sure it was hitting just right. Um, but yeah, that's sort of like, that sense that all of this whole project was just Ego trying to like relive this,
Yeah, the 7 minutes of God.
transcendent
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
experience. Yeah, this, yeah, sublime state, of like not even joy, like beyond joy, beyond anything, that can really be put into words, and that he's trying to share that with these young men in this sort of like weird backwards way, was really touching and really like, um, I feel like without that sort of, guiding light, and who's to say whether, when they wrote chapter one, if they knew about the soccer god. I think they probably had some sense that Ego had this past, and he was bringing a lot of his own stuff to this situation. Um, but yeah, I'm still not sure how much they had in mind. But like whatever the situation was there, um, I feel like it's that sort of, um, foundation, to everything else that really separates a series from entertainment. you know what I mean, that elevates it into something else, about like what it is to be human and what the potential is in being human, you know.
Oh God, there's so many great pieces there. Well, okay. I'll share a personal anecdote on that's one of the funny things about doing interviews is that you always want to make sure that your guest is able to share their perspectives and everything, and you kind of want to just be a mirror. But like, so I there are some interviews where it's like shut up and just listen, and then there are some where people do back and forth, and that's always one of the really hard parts is figuring out whether someone wants it. And neither's right or wrong. Anyways, um. Well, first of all, let me tell you, you totally nailed the translation of that because when I read that, I was like, oh, this is like the coolest thing I've like ever read in my entire life. Um,
Awesome.
and there were so many great pieces of it because like I think Blue Lock in general, I've had a few pieces of art like this. I think the Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, I would say, is one of them. The comic book Deadly Class, the movie Drive back when I was like 15 or 16. Different ones at different times, but Blue Lock for the last year of my life has been like the one that's like, oh yeah, I feel like God handed this down for me, you know. So I think that how do I describe this? I mean, there are 100 million things throughout the series that I was just like, holy shit, like what? Oh my God, someone else is talking about this thing, or like it. I mean, it. Okay, I'm getting into ramble territory, but I think like I mean, Asagi's whole like thought process in general is just like the exact way that I think about everything. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't like that. It's crazy that someone is writing about this. I was like, I didn't know these anyone else had ever thought about this. That's awesome as hell. And then like Rin, without getting into like trauma dump territory, I'm like very relatable. Uh, to, totally vibe with him. Kaiser, same thing. And it just also like I mean, you talked about it, like, and I totally agree with you that it's not, it's not just like you said, it's not just the Lord of the Flies thing, and I think lesser artists might have made it just that, but like the fact that y'all are going in, you know, each week trying to like say something new about the human condition is like just it's like crazy. I mean, it's like it's a really incredible piece of art, you know. And yeah, I mean, like I think Blue Lock in general, I mean, has inspired so many aspects of my life, but a lot of the like psychological stuff I find so fascinating, and it is like that is probably the most influential part of how I do interviews is just like all the stuff Isagi talks about, especially in like the Neo Egoist League arc when he talks about like how to motivate people and affirming them and supporting their protagonist feeling all those things. It was like, oh yeah, that's like the exact thing that I try to do like every single time I do an interview. So like
Yeah.
like that's one of those it feels like it should be illegal if that exists, because it feels like someone just like made a manual for me and I'm like, sick, dude. I'll take it. Um
Yeah.
I could go on and on and on about that. I think a follow-up question I have on that. Do you find yourself like do you have to go read like psychology books or spirituality to like understand some of the underpinnings of this or be able to write it, or are you able to just take it from the page and translate it just based on that? And it's probably maybe it's hard to maybe I should name examples. I don't know. You'll let me know, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say generally, I can go from what's on the page there, and I think it's, I mean, it's inevitable that a translator is going to bring in some of their own experience, because like, we have no choice but to read these things through the lens of you know, our lives and our conditioning and our development. Um, So, I mean, I've never played soccer at the national level, but like I have some experience of the flow state. I have some experience of kind of merging with what you're doing to the point where it's just the action. It's not like you're there doing this thing. It's just this thing is happening. Um, and have had some experience of the sort of self-actualization they talk about here of sort of relieving yourself of the chaff of, societal conditioning or family conditioning or whatever, the sorts of things we carry with us that we believe are who we are, which are just extra, and sort of getting in touch with those more fundamental desires and impulses, and reconstructing an identity around that stuff, around like what feels genuine and authentic to you. And so all that stuff gets brought to it for sure. And I think it would have been a really different thing if I had tried doing this, when I was right out of college, or like, in a totally different place in my life. I just want to have that kind of perspective. So,
I guess I'm taking this. I don't know if it's pronounced ego or ego, Jinpachi. I say ego because that's like I think how they pronounce it in the show, but
yeah.
I don't know. I guess maybe this is like a horrible question because this is kind of a yes or no thing, which I try like so hard to avoid as an interviewer. But I'm just wondering, is Ego your favorite character to translate or to write for? You mentioned like how much you love doing the monologues, and also I have to tell you how much I love reading the monologues. So you and me are simpatico in that regard. And yeah, is he your favorite character to write for?
I'd say he's one of them. I like the sort of dichotomy between these really kind of measured, thoughtful, lectures about society and human relations and all these things, and this sort of complexity of the ideas, and trying to express that with precision and care. And then, his other side where he can just be like cursing them out and just being totally insane. I think he's interesting from that regard, but I think him and Isagi are about even for me. Like so much of it is just sort of getting into Isagi's thought processes about what he's observing and analyzing. And I think those, they feel similar in terms of the complexity and really wanting to get that right. But there also tends to be a bit more of like a frantic energy, especially if he's figuring out something kind of mid-match, that he's having these like rapid fire thoughts and trying to capture that is really fun. Yeah.
I love it. That's like I think I've mentioned this in different interviews at different times, but like one of the most difficult things as an interviewer is that every single time there gets to be a point in the interview where I'm just like, holy shit, that's awesome. But I'm like, I have to ask the next question. I can't just like, it can't just be a fanboy. Uh, yeah, that's like way harder than pretty much. Okay, I'm rambling on. Um,
The
what,
same
did
thing happens while translating for sure.
it, I guess I do feel like that's maybe, I think it is a gift to a certain extent. And that's just doing research for this. That's one of the things I have come to love about manga translation is that, how do I phrase this? I mean, let's use the Blue Lock framing, for example, the idea of talented learners and geniuses. Geniuses, people who are naturally very gifted at something, talented learners, people who work extremely hard to excel at something. It seems to me that manga translation is a field made up primarily or maybe entirely of talented learners, people who just really, really love something and work really hard at it. And like,
Mhm.
I think there are a few fields, professions like that, but I think that's how you get like cool people, frankly, because I mean, I reach out to a lot of folks. I've talked to a lot of folks over the course of trying to do interviews, and things like that. And you and a couple other people are very down to earth relative to the norm. Um, and I thought about that, and I think the atomic unit of that to me, I don't want to speak for you. This is just my opinion, and I find this to be true for myself. I think when you have to work so hard to get to where you're at, and to be able to translate manga for a living, like you have to work so hard and you have to love it so much to do that, is I think at the other side of that, and this is true in other fields as well, but I think at the other side of that, you get a career, a life, whatever it is, where you're just like, holy shit, this rules. Um, I mean, I find that to be true of like doing interviews, is that like every single one I do, I'm like, this is sick as hell. I can't believe I'm doing this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I don't have a question there, but it's a thing I thought about. Oh yeah, okay, I remember what I was gonna say. Totally taking this off on a different thing. Actually, okay, two things. Um, this is sorry, you mentioned Saturday Night Live. This is not related to anything at all. Do you remember the Will Ferrell George W. Bush impression?
Hmm.
One of my favorite lines ever, and he's like, "One more thing, live from New York." No, wait, two more things. I feel like I'm channeling that sometimes when I do interviews. Anyways, um, when I think about like this is such an esoteric question. I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Zantetsu, who hasn't come up in a while. I don't know if you recall, but the dumb guy with glasses. Yeah, okay, you remember.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I'm just wondering if you could take me through just a little bit of translating him, because like almost every line he says is like a pun or something, and that's one of those things again where I just like oh man, I feel for you there. That cannot be easy to to translate that. Is Zantetsu the hardest character to translate, do you think?
I would say so. Yeah. He's somehow the hardest and the most fun. Like, did you read the Nagi spin-off series at all?
I saw the
Uh,
movie. I did not read the manga yet.
okay. It's worth your time for sure. And there's a lot of Zantetsu airtime. And yeah, it's like every single time he opens his mouth, um, I'm like, God damn it. Like it's like somehow hilarious. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Like, you're killing me, man. Um, and always give it my best. But yeah, those feel like the closest. I mean, I was going to say the closest to poetry. I think that's a little bit looser, just because like um, he's usually working with like idioms, that he's getting wrong, or like specific phrases, and then trying to find some equivalent, which sounds absurd. So in that way, it feels like a very narrow box. But there's something that feels very freeing about a character who doesn't have to make sense. Um, that you can just make it something totally absurd as long as it is close enough.
Well, and that's so interesting. Like, so what do you find yourself just like writing new jokes? Because I imagine I don't know this for a fact. I have to assume almost everything he says is not translatable as a joke. Like you could maybe say like here is what he said, and you could probably say it in like a logical way, and maybe it would make sense, but like it wouldn't be funny. So that is my assumption. Do you write new jokes for Zantetsu, or how does that work?
Um, I mean, I'm trying to recall like a specific
I think
line,
it's
and
just like there's one about like oh god I should have written this down before you asked about it. It was like there's one like demerit, like is there merit to this, or like um yeah, actually yeah, I don't know if I have one offhand. I'm putting you on the spot. I can transition us to a different thing if nothing jumps out at you.
yeah, I mean, typically it's kind of like writing parallel jokes, like looking for an idiom that fits the circumstances, and then just tweaking it enough to be absurd, to make him, look like he's trying to sound smart and just like totally missing the mark. Um, so yeah, it's rarely literal in that way, but it's like doing the same job with an equivalent that makes sense in English.
I love that. And well, okay, and I don't this is a similar like in the weeds kind of question, so I don't know if there's a there for this, but um Hiyori and Karasu, I don't know how to pronounce but
Yeah.
um I believe what's the Kansai region?
Mhm.
They it's referenced in the manga or the anime or what I've heard it referenced that they have a different dialect or a different way of speaking. Like, I don't I guess know enough about it to pick up on it or to notice the nuance. Do you find yourself having to choose different words or a different cadence or whatever for those characters because they're from a different region of Japan?
Yeah, and it's tricky because I feel like it's harder. I think it's harder to capture those sorts of things in text in English than it is in Japanese. So, like, you know, Japanese does a really good job of, if say a regional dialect, if they have slightly different vowel sounds, they'll just write that out. If they have like verbs that end kind of different way than the standard Japanese, they'll just write that out. Whereas I feel like English, you could probably pick out at least a dozen different regional dialects of this, of the United States, and yet it's hard to find good examples of that being reflected in text, that really captures what it sounds like. And so I feel like the options are a bit more limited. And so, I think the Kansai dialect, it's got like a bit of a twang to it. And so the kind of closest analog people usually do is sort of a Southern accent. So, for those two, doing something like running instead of running, just there's this perception in Japan that like Kansai Kansai speech is like a little less refined, a little coarser than like the kind of Tokyo standard. So trying to lean a little more into slang or like, those sorts of things. But I really wish often, and I'm trying to find other ways of like expressing that better. If that makes sense.
It does make sense from my perspective. It seems like you're doing an all right all right job of it
Okay.
for what it's worth. Um, I do want to get you out of here in good time. I'm trying to. I threw the structure of this interview like totally out the window because I got off on a nerd tangent for like 30 minutes. Um, so I have no idea what my last question is, but I will throw to this one and then maybe I will figure it out as we go. Um, I'm wondering. This is putting you on the spot a little bit, so maybe it's hard to think of a specific example. And I mean, I can broaden the question if nothing jumps out at you. Is there a dream project you would like to translate, whether that be, reinterpreting something that was an old translation or something that never made it out of Japan? Do you have like a white whale of translation?
Oh man. I'd really love to work on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. You know, I think that's my favorite series, and just the mix of humor and tension and history and culture and all these things. I think would just be a dream to work with. So I know Viz has a guy right now who's doing it all, but if he ever gave it up, just putting it out there. Um, I'm open. I'm interested.
I
Yeah,
will I will get my team on that. I guarantee it. My audience of trillions will help you out. Um,
yeah. Put him to work.
I okay. Again, I totally botched the structure of this. So like I'll probably try to use this as my last question, even though I don't know if it really works as the last question. But whatever, that's fine. Um,
All right, and
you,
then I've got a question for you.
oh yeah.
So
Actually,
go
tell you
ahead.
what. Let's throw to you because I guarantee what you have is going to be more interesting than what I have.
Well, we'll see. But so you've talked about how you relate to some of the different characters in Blue Lock.
Hmm.
Um, I think what I'm curious about and what I haven't quite heard is like, um, I'd love to hear more of the impact that it's had on you personally, and sort of like what are some of the core messages and takeaways that you feel like have shaped your life, and that you would kind of tell to somebody else who's maybe interested in this series, like what you've really gotten out of it.
Well, thank you so much for asking that. That's a very thoughtful and genuine question, so I appreciate that. Um, yeah, I mean, I've pretty within like 30 seconds, I will tell people about Blue Lock when they meet me. So I've told a lot of people about it, and I think okay, I'm getting off on a thing. I think the atomic unit of what is so meaningful about it to me is just the idea of chasing after what you most care about, or what is most important to you. And I think, I mean, there are a lot of different things I could say about my life or historically or whatever that kind of feed into this, but like, for example, I was a baseball player when I was a kid, and I was really really good at it. And it's one of those things of like, I ended up leaving that because, I mean, I don't know. When you're trying to remember something like 14 years later, it's, of course, funhouse mirror sort of thing. But I think what happened there is I had, in many ways, a very intense home environment. And I think baseball was like the place where I could just be my own person and not have to be like navigating other people's kind of intense shit. Um,
Yeah.
And then after a while, like, I would go up to the plate, and I would kind of feel the same way there that I did at home. So it stopped being enjoyable to me. And that was like, that's one of my big regrets in life, is that I didn't, stick with that or figure out how to get through it. Cause I mean, I loved that. Like I loved playing sports, and I honestly kind of forgot about that aspect of my life until Blue Lock, honestly. But, um, that was the thing, I loved doing that so much. But so I think that was the big element of it. There were more aspects of that question. Can you refresh me? I want to make sure I get to the heart of what you're curious about.
Yeah. It's like what, well, I think you started answering it about kind of, following what matters most to you. Um, but yeah, I guess just wondering like,
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
oh no, it's all right. I'm just trying to find the words for it.
Take your
So
time.
like,
Take your time.
um, yeah, I don't know, like just what, um,
Tell you what, I'll ramble
what
on for a
what
bit,
you've
and
gotten from it, what you've done with that. How's that?
what I've gotten from it, what I've done with that. I'm gonna write this down so I remember. Uh, 'Cause I want to, because I'm always very flattered when people ask me questions, so I want to try to answer it as best as I can. Okay, my handwriting's terrible. We'll see if I can read that in 30 seconds. Um, what I've gotten from it, what I've done with that. Like, I mean, there's so many things that like it would be. I would have to. You would have to sit here for an hour, and I'm not going to make you do that. Um, I okay. I will try to give you an honest answer, and hopefully this doesn't get too much into like trauma dump territory. I I'm the youngest of four,
Mhm.
and my eldest brother moved out in like third grade, so him and I, great relationship with him. But so when I talk about my brother, I mean my second eldest brother. But I had a very intense relationship with my brother. He was very abusive towards me. Like he would, I won't repeat it, but he would say a lot of very gnarly things to me from a young age about like, like that mom didn't love me and all that kind of thing. And then I would like try to tell my mom about what was going on. And I think she just wasn't totally primed to understand that kind of thing, because I don't know if she had encountered it in her life. Um, Maybe that's not fair. I haven't asked her about that. That's my assumption. I don't want to speak for my mom, but that had a huge, 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 huge impact on me in terms of just like, I think just kind of feeling, um, I mean, a lot of negative things, and I guess just generally having a very intense existence and kind of feeling like I was living in a war zone, and other people not acknowledging that or not understanding it. And then, and I can't blame people for this, but when I would go out into the outside world and I would bring that with me, and people didn't get it, and I didn't understand why they didn't get it, because to me it was just the water that we swim in. But like it took me a long time um to understand that other people's backgrounds are so different, and like the things that to me are normal, like the crazy intense thoughts in my head, like I had to learn not everyone has those. So I think for me, Blue Lock was a very therapeutic thing in terms of just the idea that like it's okay to want to be your own person, and like you don't have to be like the side character in someone else's life. I think, well, I'll show, I've shown it in other interviews, but I'll show you. That's like, so that's my Barrow tattoo, and that's my
Oh,
Rin
nice.
tattoo. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the top one is a character from the comic book Deadly Class. But um, I think like the Rin monologue is so in the U20 match is so, that was one of those moments of just like, well, okay, like I don't necessarily believe in like the Christian God, but the soccer God, whatever you want to call it, some higher power. Like I felt like that was the thing. I was like, they were just like, here you go. And I was like, oh, thanks, man. I'll take it. I
Yeah.
mean, like when I found Blue Lock, I was working. I think I mentioned I was working as an urban planner in Spokane County, and um what I would consider, I'm trying to mind what I say for like so people don't sue me, but I would consider it a very corrupt environment. We were being asked to do things that I considered um I don't want to say illegal, at the very least very immoral. And I felt like we were prioritizing developers, and we had a lot of conversations there about how are developers going to react to this. And like I don't we had in my entire time there, we didn't have a single conversation about like how do we help people afford homes or anything like that. Never came up. Um, that was very alienating to me, and I was very angry. And so I think the show came about at a great time for me. I first saw it, as the anime. This would have been April 2025, yeah, something like that. And I think I watched it all in like 2 or 3 days, and I was like,
Mhm.
sick, love this. This is like the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Um, and then yeah, that kind of encouraged me. There were other straws, but that was kind of the thing that was like, all right, I gotta quit my job. This fucking sucks. Because I'd saved up a bunch of money and everything, so I'm not wealthy. I couldn't live the rest of my life, but I've been able to take a year off from work, and I'm very grateful to be able to do that. Um, so it was just a thing. I was like, man, I'm being like such a pussy. Like I gotta I gotta like at least go for this. Like this is not like Isagi wouldn't do this shit. Like that's not. uh so a lot of elements here. I think that was a big part of it, and then also I think the character of Rin had a huge, huge, huge impact on me. I think Rin is like the best younger sibling in like fiction. I honestly, I've said this before, and like I'm not saying this because you're here. Like you can, I've said this in other. You could, if you watch other videos, I will have said the same thing in other times. I really think Blue Lock is like the best piece of fiction that our species has ever made. So I kind of just treat it like religion, to be honest. For good and bad. That has led to me making some mistakes, certainly, but that is
Yeah.
not the fault of anyone but myself. Um, but yeah, I think Rin had a huge impact on me in terms of like I had since a young age a lot of rage, towards my brother, and because I had this sense of like I know what he's doing to me is like wrong, but no one cares and no one is doing anything about it. So I think I have a lot of anger, and I can sometimes be very arrogant because I'm so used to being right about everything and people not listening to me. I try to let go of that because it can be very, or at the very least, I try not to apply that frame to people who do not deserve it, because I think from their perspective, it's like, what the fuck? I just met you. Why are you assuming all these things about me? Which is valid, and I have to remember like, don't do that with people. But so that whole thing of just like wanting to crush your older brother, I'm like, relate, totally feel that. Um, so that was a super cool thing. So I think the long and short of it is that it just really helped me put words, and it kind of just gave me an outlet to understand the different things I was feeling and um, why what was going on in my mind was so intense. When when I looked around me and was like, I have a job that's, sure, I guess I don't like it, but like I have a home, I have a family, I have friends, I can afford to eat and all these things, but like I still have this like murderous rage. Um, which I'm still kind of figuring out how to navigate, but um yeah, I don't know. I think I don't want to I want to be very cognizant to not give the lens of like, oh, it's so hard being a man nowadays, because that's not everyone is having a hard time. Um, I think Blue Lock is just is a great. It's very non-judgmental. Um, it's like that. What's that thing Henry Rollins said? Like, your records never yell at you. Um, so I think it was just like that for me. It was one of the first things that I found relatable, or that its intensity kind of matched what I had going on. Like,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, that's kind of the best I could say. Hopefully that gets to what you asked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that, really thoughtful and personal answer. Um, yeah, I've had plenty of my own similar experiences with manga and with other art. And it's like, yeah, I think that's one of the best things art can do, really, is to, read something and be like, wow, it's not just me, like, um, this person gets it. This person gets me. Um, that's really a really special, powerful thing, and I'm really glad you got this from this series. That's awesome.
ありゃ、自己紹介、失敗